you for having me here. Good morning to the people of Tobago, Trinidad and Tobago, and the diaspora.
Right, it's a pleasure having you this morning, and of course we're going to get straight on into the conversation. As we mentioned before, it's no secret. The reshuffle happened yesterday. We got the press release with the information and the details in terms of the reassignment of assistant secretaries primarily and one secretary as well. And so we just want to know your thoughts about the reshuffle. One, the timeliness of it, and two, your assessment in terms of the realignment of the assistant secretaries and secretary.
Well, first of all, we want to call it cloak and dagger politics because, you know, it's almost a tale of intrigue and espionage that is happening. And we have to first ask ourselves, why would you want a reshuffle in the first place? And I would think that any leader would want to reshuffle a situation where you have persons that may be the greatest form of embarrassment to the administration, persons who may not be performing in areas where you have put them, and you may want to move them. At the end of the day, the secretary is the person ultimately responsible for a division and not the assistant secretary, regardless of what you give them responsibility for. And if you look at the whole of the divisions, you ask yourself, which is the most embarrassing division at this point? Yes, you had the outburst from the Secretary of Tourism calling Tobagonians names about unwashed and whatever else. You had the Secretary of Community Development, or the then Secretary of Community Development, having quite a conflict with the minister and with the communities of Black Rock. But you then have the Secretary of Infrastructure, who has cost this administration the most money ever in terms of legal fees with the whole friendship, the roads in that area, and you know, the conflict with the EMA, the conflict with residents. I mean, that is the most embarrassing division. And therefore, if you had to do a demotion, or if you had to move someone, why not treat with that situation? But for whatever reason, he has chosen not to deal with that situation. And whilst I must congratulate the young Assemblyman Joel Sampson for his elevation, you know, I asked myself, you know, political leader to political leader, you've now demoted the political leader of the Tobago Forwards, who would have formed an alliance with you to go into office. And therefore, how is that going to play out in terms of the demotion of another political leader that would have supported getting into office and would have taken office? And so we're left to see how that is played out. I mean, Terence Baines is my classmate, not just my schoolmate. He's my classmate. So I really felt it for him. You know, it is an embarrassing situation, regardless of you saying he's now the deputy presiding officer. It is an embarrassing situation. And I don't know how that will play out. But we see further where you have someone is coming in as the new Secretary of Finance. And yes, when Assemblyman Watsuduke left, there was no replacement for a secretary. So there are currently 8 secretaries, and he does have the option of putting in another secretary without a demotion to anyone. And it's left to be seen who that can be. If you look at it right now, people are considering, oh, well, maybe he moved Councillor Sutika over there and maybe she's the next. But she really does not have the experience of economics under her belt. You then have, you can look at other assemblymen, but you wonder where is that gonna fall? Maybe they're going to terminate as a councillor and bring in someone of expertise, whether it is an Anselm Richards or some other expert that they find out there, or maybe the wild card that maybe Assemblyman Duke may walk back into his position. So we have all of that to contend with. But at the end of the day, you know, it's really about being distracted from the real issues of Tobago, the bread and butter politics of Tobago, the politics of the people. And why I say that? We've had an increasing crime rate on the island. We now have 3 women who have been murdered. We've not even completed the first quarter, good, or we just completed the first quarter in the year, and we're up to 8. And therefore you ask yourself, what is this administration doing to abate it? What is this administration doing to support those victims? You have children left behind who are motherless, fatherless. What is this administration doing to treat with that? And I am calling on them to put a special grant in place to support these families throughout this time. And that is why, you know, we called for a vigil. I called for a vigil. It was my birthday on Sunday, in addition to being Mother's Day. And I chose to spend that evening in a vigil, candlelight vigil, calling for the end of crime, you know, and really saying prayers in support of those families that have been left behind. We had about 30 people who showed up despite all the excitement across Tobago, and we were able to have a good session. I thank the Reverend Teclamarian Green as part of the Family Life Transformation, that in addition to being there yesterday, we were able to distribute, in terms of our collaboration, we were able to distribute hampers and cash to the families that were affected. 5 families who were the recipients, and we have a 6th family that we will drop that those items to in Roxborough shortly. So the administration needs to focus this whole issue of the reshuffle, like I say, cloaks and daggers, and it is something that is distracting Tobago from the real issues of what is needed in Tobago now to take us out of the rapid decline of our economy and the challenges we face socially on the island.
So Dr. Angus, in terms of policy, I mean, you mentioned earlier that the assistant secretaries really are functioning under the secretaries, and the secretaries are the ones who guide the policy within the divisions. They are the ones who, you know, ensure that the mandates are carried out and stuff like that. And so we have not seen the movement of any secretary except for one, as we mentioned before. And so we're wondering now what is going to be the impact in terms of, because if a reshuffling is to, you know, mitigate situations that might be happening, whether it is a person situation, or, you know, a competency situation, or the fact that persons just need to be reshuffled to get, whether it's to get more knowledge or more experience in a certain field. Are you convinced, or what is your position in terms of, okay, so these assistant secretaries are moved around now, what is going to happen now in terms of the secretaries? Has the mandate changed now that we have the assistant secretaries moved around? Additionally, I noticed that some of the responsibilities, or the primary responsibilities of the assistant secretaries, I'm not sure if they have changed from what the division itself was mandated to do, or if they are add-ons in terms of what was already there. How do you see that working out?
Those responsibilities were already there, and according to the legal framework, it is only the secretary who can officially sign off on anything within that division, and therefore if you move a secretary, or if you demote or elevate a secretary, when you elevate a secretary, the president has to become involved, and that tells you a lot. When you move around assistant secretaries, the president does not need to get involved necessarily. And therefore, at the end of the day, it is still ultimately the responsibility of the secretary to sign off on anything at all in the divisions. Yes, the assistant secretaries may take responsibility for guiding a process, but at the end of the day, the secretary is ultimately responsible for the decisions and sign off within those divisions.
Right. You know, when you elect people into office, people present themselves to serve. That is what we're about. That is what governance is about. You present yourself to serve. And so you won an election, and now you have to assign these people into positions. And we've had conversations on this show before. And, you know, is it that you assign them in a role where they have competence, or is it that they are on a training ground now, they're going to learn on the job as they, you know, as they are put into these positions? How is this selection made? And now that there's a reshuffling, is it because these persons have more competency in these areas, or is it, how do you see this happening, or what is, as a politician, what would be your strategy in terms of how you place your human resources?
Let's look at it. I mean, you know, I call it cloaks and daggers. Why would you move the Councillor Orlando Kerr from education, which is such a large division, and you've left education open just to the secretary alone, and you've moved them into a much smaller division of settlements and public utilities with Assemblyman Pollard, and you've given him responsibilities in there? You know, so I don't know if he's been prepared to move into settlements as the new secretary. We don't know. We will see, because I know his expertise lies in the area of education. And so for me, that was a big question. Why would you move someone from such a large division, leave that division open, and actually move him into a much smaller area? I really don't know what is the thinking of why persons were moved into different areas, whether it is giving them experience, whether it is, I'm really not sure what that is about. It's only time that we will see it playing out. But again, we are looking at a lot of distractions, and I think people are just focused on winning the next administration rather than governing the people at this time. And that is the danger that we have, that we are not focused on the people. We're just focused on the politics of winning the next administration. And therefore, that is why you have all these, you know, shape shifting that is happening. And very soon it will be interesting to see which one of them on July 1st will ascend to the position of finance secretary.
And I was leading to my next question, is like, what is your position in terms of waiting until July 1st? Do you think the announcement should have been made the same time with this reshuffle, or are you okay with waiting until the 1st of July?
It's another ploy to create another distraction then, you know, away from what has been asked about the budget. So it's another ploy to create a distraction then. Right now, you're creating a distraction because you're supposed to be really meeting with stakeholders and, you know, creating a budget involving the people's voices and not just carrying what you think and putting it on the table. So we have another distraction coming then as to who will become the finance secretary. But I dare say this, I hope that the chief secretary understands that the finance secretary really controls the assembly. Okay?
What are notes to end on? Dr. Tsoiafatt Angus here, bringing her opinion in terms of the reshuffling of the Tobago House of Assembly administration.